The crash that everyone's talking about right.
Did you know that the US government is now spending more on debt interest than on its entire military? In fiscal year 2025, Washington paid $970 billion just in interest on the national debt. Defense spending for the same year? $917 billion. So for the first time in peacetime history, the interest bill beat the Army, the Navy, the Air Force, and every missile system combined. And almost nobody in Washington said a single word about it. And here's the part that should bother you. Every dollar of that interest comes directly from taxes. From your paycheck. From everything you buy. You're personally paying the bill for money that was spent decades before you had any say in it. And the bill keeps getting bigger every single year. But that's not even the dangerous part. The dangerous part is that while everyone is looking at the wrong place, the real crisis has already started. And this one doesn't have a reset button. Most people waiting for a crash are still playing the 2008 playbook. They remember the housing collapse. They remember the banks failing, the stock market losing more than half its value, people losing their homes. And they've been sitting on the sidelines, sometimes for years, waiting for a similar moment, so they can buy back in at the bottom and ride the recovery. But here's what nobody wants to say out loud. The crash already happened, just not the way anyone expected. Since January 2020, the U.S. economy has seen prices rise more than 25%, according to Bureau of Labor Statistics CPI data. That means the $100 you had in savings 5 years ago buys roughly $79 worth of stuff today. No crash announcement, no single dramatic event, just a quiet, steady erosion that keeps going. Food prices are up nearly 30% since 2019, according to USDA data. Gas, insurance, rent, medical bills, all higher. And wages? They technically kept up on paper, but the life those wages can buy looks completely different. So how are people covering the gap? Credit cards. The Federal Reserve Bank of New York reported that total American credit card debt hit a record $1,277 trillion in Q4 of 2025. That's a 5.5% jump in a single year. And this isn't people buying luxury items. A separate survey by Achieve found that 55% of people carrying card balances are using them to pay for essentials. Groceries, utilities, rent, medical bills. The average interest rate on those balances is around 22% annually per Federal Reserve data. Think about that for a second. Tens of millions of Americans are borrowing money at 22% interest just to eat and keep the lights on. That's not a healthy economy. That's a slow motion breakdown that doesn't have a dramatic crash announcement because it's already everywhere. Now zoom out, because what's happening in people's bank accounts is just a mirror of something much bigger. As of March 2026, the total U.S. national debt stands at approximately $38.9 trillion. According to the Joint Economic Committee of the U.S. Senate, it's been growing at more than $8 billion per day. That's $5.5 million every single minute. Around the clock. On holidays, the meter never stops. And this isn't some abstract future problem. The Congressional Budget Office confirmed in early 2026 that U.S. debt held by the public has now crossed 100% of GDP. Meaning the government owes more than the entire country produces in a single year. The last time that happened in America? World War II financing. We're not in a world war. This is regular, everyday peacetime. In fiscal year 2025, the government ran a $1.78 trillion deficit. It spent $7 trillion and collected only $5.2 trillion in taxes, according to the U.S. Treasury. The CBO projects the gap gets even worse in 2026. $1.9 trillion. Now, here's the part that really locks everything together. When you hear that interest payments hit $970 billion in 2025 on more than defense, it's easy to think, Washington problem, not mine. But what it actually means is that 1 out of every $5 the federal government collects in taxes goes straight to paying interest. Not roads, not schools, not hospitals, not veterans, just interest, just the cost of yesterday's debt. And the CBO says that interest bill will hit $1 trillion for the first time ever in fiscal year 2026 and keep climbing to $1.8 trillion by 2035. The government isn't building anything for the future. It's paying the tab for the past, and you're the one picking up the check. Before we go further, because I want you to really feel the contrast, let's look at how other countries are handling this, because not everyone is doing it the same way. Norway has oil, just like several other countries. But Norway made a different decision with the money. Instead of spending it as it came in, they created a fund, a savings vehicle for future generations. That fund, the Government Pension Fund Global, is now worth $2.2 trillion as of the end of 2025, according to Norges Bank Investment Management. It earned a 15.1% return for the year, generating the equivalent of $247 billion in profit in a single year. Norway has a population of about 5.6 million people. That's less than the city of Chicago, and their fund has $2.2 trillion the whole country. The entire fund is managed with strict rules. The government can only spend a small percentage of it each year to make sure future generations aren't left with nothing. Meanwhile, the United States, with 330 million people in the world's largest economy, is $38.9 trillion in debt, adding $8 billion to that number every single day, and paying $970 billion per year just in interest. Not investing, not saving, just servicing the debt. And the housing situation tells the same story. Take Canada, a country Americans are used to comparing themselves to. In Vancouver, the typical first-time homebuyer is now 46 years old, according to a 2025 global study by Bloom Holding. In Toronto, it's 40. Those numbers come from a country that also has a serious affordability crisis. But in parts of Europe, Germany, Austria, the Netherlands, first-time homebuyers still typically enter the market in their early to mid-30s. Why? Because those countries never let their housing markets become as distorted by cheap money and underbuilding as the US and Canada did over the last 15 years. The point isn't that other countries are perfect, they're not. The point is that this didn't have to happen this way. These were choices. And the people making those choices weren't the ones paying the price for them. But of all the numbers I dug into while putting this together, one stopped me completely. Not the debt figure, not the deficit. A housing number. According to the National Association of Realtors 2025 report, based on actual transactions, the median age of a first-time home buyer in the United States is now 40 years old. For the first time ever in recorded history. When NAR started tracking this in 1981, the median age was 29. As recently as 2010, just 15 years ago, it was 30. In 2021, it was still 33. In 4 years, the typical age to buy your first home jumped 7 years. One editor at Resi Club put it in a way I can't stop thinking about. The first-time home buyer in 2025 is just as close to the age when you can start collecting Social Security as they are to their high school graduation. Let that sink in. You graduate high school at 18, you can start taking Social Security at 62. Today's first-time homebuyer is exactly in the middle. And it's not just first-time buyers. The Apollo chief economist calculated from the same NAR data that the median age of any homebuyer in America, including people upgrading or downsizing, is now 59 years old. The average homebuyer in the United States is a senior citizen. First-time buyers now make up just 21% of all home purchases, a historic low. Before 2008, that number was around 40%. And institutional investors, hedge funds, private equity, large property companies now account for a record 30% of all single-family home purchases, according to TCW research. Regular people are being priced out. Corporations are buying up what's left. NAR estimates that a 10-year delay in homeownership costs the average person around $150,000 in lost equity. That's not a statistic. That's a retirement. That's a college fund. That's the difference between having something to pass on and having nothing. The American dream isn't being delayed. It's being bought out from under ordinary people. And nobody in Washington is talking about it. Before I get to who's actually benefiting from all of this, and yes, someone definitely is, I need to show you one more thing. On February 24th, 2026, President Trump delivered the longest State of the Union address in U.S. history, an hour and 47 minutes, 10,887 words, extensive coverage of the economy. According to Fortune's reporting on the transcript, the phrase national debt was not spoken once. Not once. In an economy with $38.9 trillion in debt, adding $8 billion a day. But here's the thing. This isn't a Trump problem. It's not a Republican problem or a Democrat problem. It's a system problem. Democrats have been equally silent. Both parties voted together to raise the debt ceiling by $5 trillion in July 2025, adding another $5 trillion of room to borrow without a single plan to pay any of it back. A January 2026 index from the Peter G. Peterson Foundation found that 82% of American voters say lawmakers need to spend more time addressing the national debt. The public wants action. The politicians are doing nothing. Why? Let's look at who sits in Congress. More than half of all members of Congress are millionaires, according to Open Secrets data. Their median net worth is dramatically higher than the median American household. And more than 100 members of Congress have been actively trading stocks, making around 10,000 trades per year since at least 2021, according to Unusual Whales, often in the exact sectors their committees regulate. A 2025 report found that among members who traded stocks that year, 29 of them outperformed the S&P 500, which itself returned 16.6%. Think about what that means. The people voting on legislation that moves markets are also trading in those same markets. A bipartisan bill to ban congressional stock trading passed out of a Senate committee in July 2025. It hasn't been voted on by the full Senate since. It's been stuck ever since. Now connect the dots. When inflation runs at 25% over 5 years, the people who hold assets, stocks, real estate, private equity, see their net worth increase. The people who hold savings see their money quietly disappear. The Federal Reserve Bank of New York described this in Q4 2025 as a K-shaped economy, where some groups are thriving while others are really struggling. It's not a single crash where everyone suffers together. It's a slow, invisible transfer. Up the ladder, not down. The debt keeps growing, the interest keeps compounding, the dollar keeps losing value, housing keeps getting further out of reach, and the people in charge of fixing it, the same people whose investment portfolios benefit from the system staying exactly as it is, keep finding reasons not to act. The system isn't broken, it's working perfectly, just not for you. So what do you actually do with this? Because looking at the numbers and just feeling angry doesn't pay rent. There are 3 levels of response, and they're not mutually exclusive. The first is personal and immediate. Stop holding assets that get destroyed by inflation. That $100 in a savings account earning 1 or 2% while inflation runs at 3 to 4% loses real value every single year. The people who have navigated previous inflationary periods moved their money into things with intrinsic value. Real estate when it was accessible, commodities like gold, businesses with real cash flows that rise with prices. The core idea is simple. The dollar is being inflated. Anything that isn't the dollar tends to hold up better. That's not investment advice, it's arithmetic. The second is political and medium term. The organizations tracking this most closely, the Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget, the Peter G. Peterson Foundation, the Bipartisan Policy Center, have been pushing for a formal fiscal commission, a structured body with members from both parties, with a mandate to propose a real debt reduction plan that Congress has to vote on. It worked for Social Security reform in 1983. The mechanism exists. What's missing is public pressure, and that starts with voters knowing enough to demand it. The third is structural and long-term. At some point, a serious public conversation needs to happen about what kind of monetary system actually protects ordinary people's savings over time. Every dollar printed to service existing debt transfers a little wealth from people holding dollars to people holding real assets. That's not a conspiracy. It's just how inflation works. The countries that have managed this better, Norway, Germany, others, made different decisions about how to constrain spending and preserve purchasing power. Those decisions are available to America too. They're just politically inconvenient. Waiting for a 2008-style reset where you can buy the dip and ride the recovery is a strategy for a different kind of crisis. This crisis doesn't have a dip. It has a slow, permanent slide. And the difference between people who understand that and people who don't is becoming very visible. Movement 1, verdict. This isn't a future crisis. It's the current one. The dollar lost more than 25% of its purchasing power since 2020. Credit card debt is at an all-time record. The interest bill on the national debt crossed $1 trillion. The median first-time homebuyer is 40 years old. These aren't projections. They're the numbers as of March 2026. Movement 2, generalization. And this isn't a partisan story. It doesn't matter which party you vote for. Debt was added under every president for the last 25 years. Both parties raised the debt ceiling in 2025. When the dollar loses value, it loses value for everyone's savings. When housing becomes unaffordable, it's unaffordable regardless of your political opinion. The math is nonpartisan. The bill comes for everyone. Movement 3, the moral provocation. So here's the question I can't stop asking. If the median homebuyer is now 59 years old, what does that mean for the 32-year-old who's been working and saving for years and still can't get in? If Social Security faces a potential benefit cut of 24% in 2032, which the Committee for Responsible Federal Budget projects, what does that mean for the 58-year-old who has nothing else? And if the members of Congress who are supposed to solve this are also the ones actively trading stocks in the markets affected by their own legislation, whose interests are actually being represented here? Movement 4, participatory question. You probably feel some version of this already. Things cost more. Your money doesn't go as far. The life that felt achievable a few years ago feels further away. I want to know, what are you actually doing about it? Are you moving money out of cash, paying down debt, waiting for something to break? Or are you already on the other side of this, building something that holds up? Drop it in the comments, because I know I'm not the only one thinking about this, and your answer might be exactly what someone else needs to hear. And if you want to understand exactly which assets have held up best in every inflationary period of the last 100 years, and how to position yourself before the next phase of this plays out, that's the next video. It's linked right there.